So to reflect on Tipperary's Munster final win over Cork, 17 points to 14, I'm joined by Steven Poacher. Stephen, first of all, you sent me along an image of what you thought was the Tipperary setup for the game. So I'm just going to bring that up on screen in a minute. But first of all, just to reflect on the win, why do you think Cork left? You know, everyone thought Cork were massive favourites after beating Kerry. What happened Cork?
Shane, probably a combination of things. You know, we had discussed this probably in the lead up to the game, that, you know, complacency is a dangerous word to use, of course, but it is very difficult to come from the elation of beating Kerry for the first time in whatever amount of years it was, you know, and in the circumstances in which they'd done it, to all of a sudden have to bring yourself right back down and play Tipperary. And I felt there was a lot of emotion surrounding the game, and I thought that the emotion was actually going to play into Cork's hands, Shane, because, you know, Tipperary were using a new jersey. It was 100 years, of course, since the tragedy in Croke Park and Bloody Sunday, and we had all this hanging over. But it was only after the game, Shane, when you listen to Conor Sweeney and you listen to how mature he spoke, and you listen to, you know, how he talked about 2 weeks ago after they got out of jail against Limerick. They sat down and said, right, there's a big day coming up, but we park the emotion, we park everything that's going on the day, and we focus on the football. You know, and I thought that was a great line of maturity from him. And, you know, he's been around a long time, of course, Shane, and he's an experienced player at this stage. And, you know, he's an intelligent guy. And you just listened to him, and I felt to myself, you know, Tipperary were coming in a really good frame of mind. I was disappointed in Cork. You know, Cian O'Neill's involved with Cork, and I seen little traits of even how Kildare would have approached playing against. Kildare under Cian O'Neill traditionally would have struggled against defensive teams, Shane. And I felt Cork fell into that same trap on Sunday of running the ball into traffic, running the ball through the middle of Tipperary. But on the flip side of that, Shane, Tipperary were very well organised. You know, they had set up a really, really compact shape and a compact system. Their wing backs tucked in. You know, the centre half back was excellent as well. They set up a wall of four across the middle. And I just thought Cork played just beautifully into Tip's hands. And Tip, for me, it's like any game, it's like any underdog. You know, Tip went in as big underdogs, but they got a great start. And once you get a great start, it gives you great confidence and it gives you a great platform to build from, Shane. And I just felt the longer the game went on, the more Tip grew in confidence and the more energy was just drained out of Cork.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring up the image you sent me with that setup of the Tipperary team. I had it up there for a second. And what you have here is the two men up in the forward line. You've Conor Sweeney, and you have another man inside with him. Then you've got Michael Quindovan standing more or less on the 45. And behind that, you have a bank of Tipperary players. Obviously, a couple of markers back, but a couple of extra men back. And just to note there that number 12 there is actually number 19, Colin O'Riordan, who was such a huge part in this game. So can you talk to me a little bit about the Tipperary setup on the tactics board that you had there?
Well, Shane, what you had is you obviously had your matchups, okay? So the three matchups that Tipperary had focused on, obviously up front, would have been the likes of Luke Conley, you know, Keane. It would have been the likes of Hurley at full forward. They would have focused on three key matchups. So no matter where those three would have went, the third three matchups would have followed them. But what they actually had, Shane, was that a half back line, Mahi and Fahy, they had tucked in. Keeley as well had tucked in. Midfielders had dropped off when they lost the ball. So what they had was Brian Fox played a pivotal role as well, coming back as sweeper. What they had then, Shane, was they had a really, really nice, compact defensive system, you know, which was going to stop Cork's runners coming through the middle. But the key for me, Shane, was that Tipperary didn't allow themselves to get drawn out in these areas here. They didn't allow themselves to get drawn wide, you know, which was obviously what Cork would have wanted. Was Cork would have wanted the likes of this to happen. You know, Cork would have wanted Tip to follow their runners and all of a sudden to leave spaces and gaps, because Cork have a lot of energy and a lot of really good athletes and a lot of powerful runners. But Tip were really, really well organised in this capacity, Shane, at doing this. But the key thing is anyone can really set up like this. You know, that's the easy part for me. The easy part is setting the team up defensively, having your shape right, having your organisation. But what they had up front, Shane, was they'd got two absolute, what you would call world-class footballers, you know, in Quinlivan and Sweeney, if you want to call it in GAA terms. You know, two guys that are just absolutely at the top of their game. Real handful for any defender. And when you've got two lads that got up front who can also, Shane, as I always say as well, just do something outside of the norm. Quinlivan's point with the outside of his foot, his point when he came off the shoulder and kicked under pressure. Sweeney winning a ball and three men hanging off him and using his strength and his power, despite the referee holding his hand up for an advantage, to still kick the point. You know, and when you have that, Shane, you've always got a chance. You've always got a chance. But what I loved about them, Shane, was they turned the ball over once here. It was Brian Fox turned the ball over here. And there was a clip in the Sunday game, was beautiful. It was a kick pass released into space to the number 3 who had broken already. He had broken already. But what you'd noticed is, even though Quinlivan was going to get the ball, even though he was going to get the ball and shoot, you still had those 5, 6, 7 support players coming up in possession of the ball to give the man on the ball options. Now, Quinlivan, of course, took the shot on and scored. And after, if you look at the clip, Shane, very closely, after he scores, you can actually see 3 men in the clip presenting themselves as if to say, I'm here, I'm here. Now, obviously, he kicked it over perfect, it doesn't matter, but the option was still there to give it. And what that done for them, Shane, as well, was it allowed them then, when they're that high up the field, to press Cork's kickouts. So what you had a situation then was, Cork weren't getting any primary ball. Tipperary had their numbers up, and both teams tended to kick long. But as you rightly said, the jewel in the crown, Reardon coming back, like the ball he won from his own kickouts, the disruption he caused, the hits he put in, the physicality he provided around that middle third, just give Tip the added icing on the cake that they really needed,
And like, when you look at this Cork team, I thought Ian Maguire was the only one who stood up for the entire game. Luke Connolly in the first half, and him going off injured was obviously a huge blow. But what about Cork not having Sean Poacher? What about like having so many young lads in defence? I think like maybe 5 of them were 22 and younger. Like, what are the things that changed from the Kerry game?
Well, I think one of the things that changed from the Kerry game, Shane, was particularly the middle third. In the middle third, Tipperary got far too much ball through Cork far too easily, and that one counter attack that I highlighted in the short video on the tactics board was probably a prime example of how loose Cork defended. If you look at Tipperary, where is Tipperary's energy line? Where's their scores coming from? Well, it's coming from Sweeney and it's coming from Quinlivan, and I just felt Cork were a little naive, Shane, in the way they set up. They were a little naive in how they were broken down and how they get the ball turned over. Shane, I suppose it's like anything, and if I just go back to the board for a wee second, okay? And say you've got bodies back in this area here and you've got congestion, right? What you want to do is, you don't want to feed this team energy. And what Cork provided Tipperary with was free energy. Every time you turn a team over in this area of the field here, it gives you great energy. And I referred to the game very similar to my own experience when Cian O'Neill was with Kildare back in 2018. You bring a defensive template. You have a plan. You bring a serious level of defensive aggression and intensity in this area, because it's okay having safety in numbers, but if you don't have that intensity and that aggression. I spoke to Tomas O'Shea just briefly, over a message, and I just said to him, about Tip's shape, and he confirmed the way they were playing, how their wing backs were tucking in. He says, but Stevie, he says, they're meeting with serious fire and aggression every time Cork come into this area, and that was a wee bit of naivety, Shane, because Cork were kept bringing the ball into contact. Instead of putting a real stretch in the game, instead of moving the ball around the cordon, being a little bit more patient, and biding their time. And I think against Kerry, what they done very well was that when Kerry broke on Cork were extremely good on the cynical side of things, Shane. Breaking the play down, stopping Kerry coming out, stopping Kerry building, particularly in this middle third, the flooding it with volleys. They got their matchups perfect against Kerry. And I felt just on Sunday past, that same level of intensity just was missing from Cork's performance. And it was actually ironically Tipperary that brought the fire and the passion and the aggression. But look, obviously losing Luke Connolly at half-time was a huge loss to them. He's another top forward from place kicking perspective. I don't think he missed too much in the first half. And the very first kick, if you remember, at the start of the second half, Cork had a free kick, very, 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 very close to a right footer side. Would have been a tap over for Connolly in his standards, and they missed it. And I felt that the substitutes they brought on against Kerry had a great. Come back to the Cavan game, when you think of Conor Madden's impact in the last couple of games, the substitutes that you bring on in one game don't necessarily work the following game, and that tended to happen on Sunday with Cork, unfortunately for them.
Yeah, because a lot of it comes down to leadership for me on the biggest days. And like, if you go back last year when a lot of the marquee forwards for Cork struggled against Dublin, it was the likes of Luke Connolly that was getting the goal. Luke Connolly's the one who came on and turned the game the last day, and the previous day against Kerry, Luke Connolly was the only one standing up. And like, all these brilliant forwards they didn't. And then also you talked about the start of the second half, Mark Collins missed a free. They also they scored a point either side of that, and then their next 4 shots were wide or blocked. Like, so where is the leadership problem with that Cork team? Is it as simple as that? Because you still did beat Kerry, and that takes a fair bit of going, you know.
Yeah, and listen, you know, on the night that they beat Kerry, Shane, you've got to realise as well too, all the little variables were going for them. You know, the referee, you know, he was a tip ref, ironically, and you know, I think that he did allow Cork to commit a serious high level of fouls that day. You know, and the conditions obviously suited them. You know, it was a unique situation that they found themselves in against Kerry that night. And as you say, what Cork were doing on Sunday against Tip were exactly what Kerry was doing against Cork. You know, every wide was just, you could just see the energy draining. And what that does, it gives the underdog great confidence. It gives the underdog great hope. And the longer you stay in the game, and if you're a real red hot favourite like Cork were or like Kerry were, the longer the underdog is just there, and we've seen it with Donegal and Cavan, the more nervy the favourite becomes. You know, the less nervy the underdog becomes, because they can smell blood. You know, they can sniff, they can see the finishing line. You know, tooth and nail. You know, they're clawing at that stage. They're thinking, look, we have nothing to lose. And I remember listening to a couple of interviews after the Cavan Donegal game where players were talking nothing to lose and the likes of that and those narratives. And Tip would have went into this game saying, look, everyone is writing us off here. You know, no one gives us a chance. But Shane, let's go right back to the National League. These two teams contested the same league. These two teams were only one kick of the ball away from Tip, 1 point in it in the league. So it's not as if Tip were getting in, but I heard a really interesting comment after it, and I've seen it at club level here and down that it happens. You know, some teams fear playing Burn, but they'll not fear playing Kilcoo. And it was interesting to hear David Power, I think it might have been David, where he talked about this group of players don't fear playing Cork, but there's maybe a little bit of a anxiety factor when they face Kerry. And it was very interesting hearing that, you know. So I would say when Cork beat Tip, when Cork beat Kerry and Tip got over the line against Limerick, I would say Tip were quietly thinking, we have some chance. And they're probably in hindsight, Shane, thinking, we're never going to beat Kerry and Cork to win Munster. We're never going to beat both. But we've got a serious chance now of winning Munster by just beating one of them, you know. And that was their opportunity. That was their time. And you know, I dropped David a message on Monday morning to congratulate him. I thought his interview after the game, Shane, was so passionate, and I thought as well too, for a man who, I would say, everyone sees the glamour on Sunday. You know, David along the line doing the interviews for the Sunday game. But I don't think no one would have seen David jumping in a car and trawling players all over the country at development squad level and doing his bit for Tipperary football. And guys like that, boy, they're the real heroes of the GAA, Shane. You know, they're not the guys that are coming in, not the outside managers who come in and, you know, command a big fee and clear off after a couple of years or whatever. But David's there. He's there for the right reasons. He's there for longevity. You know, he wants success. He's a proud Tip man. You know, and it's a very difficult sell. It's a very difficult sell to a group of players. A very difficult sell to a group of players to say to them, you know, that you are passionate and really, you know, really strong feelings about their county. And I never foreseen myself coaching or managing outside of my own county, because I love my own county and I've coached at every level in my own county. And I never seen myself, and I did with Carlo. But as I said to the boys in Carlo, I never thought I would develop an affiliation and a bond with them as much as I did. And I think it was maybe from where we came from and where we got to. And on a reflection, when you look back at the weekend, it reminded me of some of the highs that we had. And listening to David on Sunday night was just class, because I could sense the emotion in his voice. I could see how much it meant to him, you know. And I just, as I said to him on Monday in the text, they've now created an immortality for that group. That group will be forever known for lifetime, as far as we will know life, you know, as a group of Tipperary footballers who got over the line. And fair dues to them. It was so refreshing, and it was a wonderful Sunday's afternoon of football.